All right, everyone. Hope you all having a great day so far. So we are going to continue with the Book of Jasher. Now we are going to read this section from chapter Jasher chapter 41 all the way to the end of Jasher chapter 44. So we're going to read 41 to 44 in the Book of Jasher. And this is going to be in details regarding Joseph's persecution from when he was with this family all the way up until he was persecuted in Egypt. All right, so now I'm going to start reading and let me know if you have any questions, etc. Chapter 41. At the turn of the year, the sons of Jacob journeyed from Shechem, and they came to Hebron to their father Isaac, and they dwelt there. But their flocks and herds, and they fed daily in Shechem, for there was in those days good and rich pasture there. And Jacob and his sons and all their household dwelt in the valley of Hebron. And it came to be in those days, in that year, being the 106th year in the life of Jacob, in the 10th year of Jacob's coming from Padan Aram, that Leah, the wife of Jacob, died, and she was 51 years old when she died in Hebron. Jacob and his sons buried her in the cave in the field of Machpelah, which is in Hebron, which Abraham had brought from the children of Heth for the possession of a burial place. The sons of Jacob dwelt with their father in the valley of Hebron, and all the inhabitants of the land knew their strength, and report of them went throughout the land. And Joseph, the son of Jacob, and his brother Benjamin, the sons of Rachel, the wife of Jacob, were still young in those days, and they did not go out with their brothers during their battles in all the cities of the Amorites. And when Joseph saw the strength of his brothers and their might, he praised them and exalted them, but he ranked himself greater than them and exalted himself above them. And Jacob his father also loved him more than any of his sons, for he was a son of his old age, and through his love towards him he made him a long robe. And when Joseph saw that his father loved him more than his brothers, he continued to exalt himself above his brothers, and he brought evil reports to his father concerning them. And the sons of Jacob, seeing the whole of Joseph's conduct towards them, and that their father loved him more than any of them, hated him and could not speak peaceably to him all the days. And Joseph was 17 years old, and he was still extolling himself above his brothers, and the thought of raising himself above them. And that time he dreamed a dream, and he came to his brothers and told them his dream. And he said to them, I dreamed a dream, and see, we were all binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf rose and placed itself on the ground, and your sheaves surrounded it and bowed down to it. And his brothers answered him and said to him, what does this dream mean that you dream? Do you think in your heart to reign or rule over us? And he even came and told the matter to his father Jacob. And Jacob kissed Joseph when he heard these words from his mouth, and Jacob favored Joseph. And when the sons of Jacob saw that their father had favored Joseph and had kissed him, and that he loved him exceedingly, they became jealous of him and hated him the more. And after this, Joseph dreamed another dream, related that dream to his father in the presence of his brothers. And Joseph said to his fathers and brothers, look, I have again dreamed a dream, and see, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. And his father heard the words of Joseph and his dream, and seeing that his brothers hated Joseph because of the matter, Jacob therefore rebuked Joseph before his brothers because of this matter, saying, what does this dream mean which you have dreamed? This magnifying of yourself before your brothers who are older than you? Do you think in your heart that I and your mother and your 11 brothers will come and bow down to you? that you speak these words? And his brothers were jealous of him because of his words and dreams, and they continued to hate him, but Jacob kept the dreams in his heart. And the sons of Jacob went one day to feed their father's flock in Shechem, and they were still herdsmen in those days. And while the sons of Jacob were feeding in Shechem, they delayed, and the time of the gathering in the cattle was past. They had not arrived. And Jacob saw that his sons were delayed in Shechem, and Jacob said within himself, maybe the people of Shechem have risen up to fight against them, therefore they have delayed coming this day. And Jacob called Joseph his son and commanded him, saying, look, your brothers are feeding in Shechem this day, and see, they have not yet come back. And now therefore, go now therefore and see where they are, and bring me word back concerning the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock. And Jacob sent his son Joseph in the valley of Hebron, and Joseph came for his brothers to Shechem and could not find them. And Joseph went about the field which was near Shechem to see where his brothers had turned. And he lost his way in the wilderness and did not know which way he should go. And the messenger of Yahuwah found him wandering in the way towards the field. And Joseph said to the messenger of Yahuwah, I seek my brothers. Have you not heard where they are feeding? And the messenger of Yahuwah said to Joseph, I saw your brothers feeding here, and I heard them say they would go to feed in Dothan. And Joseph listened to the voice of the messenger of Yahuwah, and he went to his brothers in Dothan, and he found them in Dothan feeding the flock. But Joseph advanced to his brothers, but before he came near to them, they have resolved to slay him. And Simon said to his brothers, look, the man of dreams is coming to us this day. And now therefore come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits that are in the wilderness. And when his father shall seek him for us, we will say an evil beast devoured him. And Reuben heard the words of his brothers concerning Joseph, and he said to them, you should not do this manner, for how can we look up to our father Jacob? Throw him into this pit to die there, but do not stretch out a hand on him to spill his blood. And Reuben said this in order to deliver him from their hand, to bring him back to his father. And when Joseph came to his brothers, he sat before them, and they rose upon him and seized him and struck him to the earth, and stripped the long robe which he had on. And they took him and cast him into a pit, in the pit where there was no water but serpents and scorpions. And Joseph was afraid of the serpents and the scorpions that were in the pit. And Joseph cried out with a loud voice, and Yahuwah hid the serpents and scorpions in the sides of the pit, and they did no harm to Joseph. And when Joseph called out from the pit to his brothers and said to him, what have I done to you, and in what have I sinned? Why do you not fear Yahuwah concerning me? Am I not your flesh and bones? Is not Jacob your father and my father? Why do you do this matter to me this day? And how will you be able to look up to our father Jacob? And he continued to cry out and call to his brothers from the pit. And he said, O Judah, Simon, Levi, my brothers, lift me up from the place of darkness in which you put me, and come this day to have compassion on me, you children of Yahuwah, the sons of Jacob my father. And if I have sinned towards you, are you not the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? If they saw an orphan, they have compassion on him, or one that was hungry, they gave him bread to eat, or one that was thirsty, they gave him water to drink, or one that was naked, they covered him with garments. And how then will you withhold your pity from your brother? For I am your flesh and bones. And if I have sinned towards you, indeed, will you do this because of my father? And Joseph spoke those words from the pit, but his brothers would not listen to him, nor incline their ears to the words of Joseph. And Joseph was crying and weeping in the pit. And Joseph said, oh, that my father knew this day the deed that which my brothers have done to me, and the words they have spoken to me this day. And all his his brothers went to remove themselves from the pit, so that they might not hear the cries of Joseph and his weeping in the pit. Chapter 42. And they went and sat on the opposite side, about a distance of a bow shot, and they sat there to eat bread. And while they were eating, they consulted together what was to be done with him, whether to slay him or to bring him back to his father. And they were consulting, and when they lifted up their eyes and looked, and see, there was a company of Ishmaelites coming at a distance by the way of Gilead, going down to Egypt. And Judah said to them, what gain will it be to us if we slay our brother? Maybe Yahuwah will require him from us. This then is the counsel proposed concerning him, which you shall do to him. See this company of Ishmaelites going down to Egypt. Now therefore, come, let us dispose of him to them, and let our hand not be upon him, and they will lead him along with them, and he will be lost among the people of the land, and we will not put him to death with our own hands. And the proposal pleased his brothers, and they did according to the word of Judah. And while they were speaking out this matter before the company of the Ishmaelites, they had come up to them 7 trading men of Midian, passed by them, and they were thirsty, and they lifted up their eyes and saw the pit in which Joseph was confined, and they looked, and see, every species of bird was upon it. And these Midianites ran to the pit to drink water, and they thought that it contained water. And on coming before the pit, they heard the voice of Joseph crying and weeping in the pit. And they looked down into the pit, and they looked, and see, there was a youth, handsome in form and appearance. And they called to him and said, who are you, and who brought you here, and who placed you in this pit in the wilderness? And they all assisted to raise Joseph up, and they drew him out, and they brought him up from the pit, and took him, and went away on their journey, and passed by his brothers. And they said to them, why do you do this, to take our servant from us to go away? Indeed, we placed this youth in the pit because he rebelled against us, and you come and bring him up and lead him away. Now then, give us back our servant. And the Midianites answered and said to the sons of Jacob, is this your servant, or does this man attend you? Maybe you are all his servants, for he is more handsome in form and appearance than any of you. And why do you all speak falsely to us? Now therefore we will not listen to your words, nor attend to you, for we found this youth in the pit in the wilderness, and we took him, and we will therefore go on. And all the sons of Jacob approached them and stood up to them and said to him, give us back our servant. Why should you all die with the edge of the sword? And the Midianites cried out against them, and they drew their swords and approached the fight against the sons of Jacob. And see, Simon rose up from his place against them, and leaped on the ground, and drew his sword, and approached the Midianites. And he gave a terrible shout before them, so that his shouting was heard at a distance, and the earth shook at Simon's shouting. And the Midianites were afraid because of Simon and the noise of his shouting, and they fell upon their faces and were extremely alarmed. And Simon said to them, truly I am Simon, the son of Jacob the Hebrew, who have, and only with my brother, destroyed the city of Shechem and the city of the Amorites. So shall Yahuwah also do that to me of all your brothers, the people of Midian, and also the sovereigns of Canaan were to come with you, and they could not fight against me. Now therefore give us back the youth whom you taken, lest I give your flesh to the birds of the skies and the beasts of the earth. And the Midianites were more afraid of Simon, and they approached the sons of Jacob with dread and fear, and with humble words, saying, indeed, you have said that the young man is your servant, and that he rebelled against you, and therefore you placed him in the pit. What then will you do with a servant who rebels against his manner? Now therefore sell him to us, and we will give you all that you require for him. And Yahuwah was pleased to do this in order that the sons of Jacob would not slay their brother. And the Midianites, seeing that Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, desired him in their hearts, and were urged to purchase him from his brothers. And the sons of Jacob listened to the Midianites, and they sold their brother Joseph to them for 20 pieces of silver. But Reuben, their brother, was not with them. And the Midianites took Joseph and continued their journey to Gilead. And they were going along the way, but the Midianites repented of what they had done in having purchased the young man. One said to another, "What is this matter that we have done in taking this youth from the Hebrews, who is handsome in form and appearance? Maybe this youth is stolen from the land of the Hebrews. Why then have we done this matter? And if we should be sought for and found in our hands, we shall die through them. And now indeed strong and mighty men have sold him to us, the strength of one in whom you saw this day. Maybe they stole him from his land with their might and their powerful arm, and they have therefore sold him to us for a small value, which we gave to them." And while they were so speaking together, they looked and see the company of Ishmaelites, which was coming at first, which was the sons of Jacob Saul, was advancing towards the Midianites. And the Midianites said to each other, "Come, let us sell this youth to the company of Ishmaelites who are coming towards us, and we will take for him the little that we gave for him, and we will be delivered from this evil." And they did so, and they reached the Ishmaelites, and the Midianites sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, in which they had given for him to his brothers. And the Midianites went on their way to Gilead, and the Ishmaelites took Joseph, and they let him ride upon one of the camels, and they were leading him to Egypt. And Joseph heard that the Ishmaelites were proceeding to Egypt, and Joseph lamented and wept at this matter, for he was to be so far removed from the land of Canaan from his father, and he wept bitterly while he was riding upon the camel. And one of their men observed him and made him go down from the camel and walk on foot. Nevertheless, Joseph continued to cry and weep, and he said, "Oh, my father, my father." And one of the Ishmaelites rose up and struck Joseph on the cheek, but he still continued to weep. And Joseph was tired on the way, and he was unable to continue because of the bitterness of his being. And they all struck him and afflicted him along the way, and they frightened him in order that he might stop weeping. And Yahuwah saw the desire of Joseph and his trouble, and Yahuwah brought down upon those men darkness and confusion, and the hand of everyone that struck him became withered. And they said to each other, "What is this matter that Yahuwah has done to us on the way?" They did not know that this befell them because of Joseph. And the men continued on the way, and they passed along the way of Ephrath, where Rachel was buried. And Joseph reached his mother's grave, and Joseph hastened and ran to his mother's grave and fell upon the grave and wept. And Joseph cried aloud upon his mother's grave. He said, "Oh, my mother, my mother, oh, you who brought me forth, awake now and rise and see your son, how he has been sold for a slave, and no one to pity him. Oh, rise and see your son. Weep with me because of my troubles, and see the heart of my brothers. Arise, my mother, arise, awake from your sleep for me, and direct your battles against my brothers. Oh, how they stripped me of my robe, and already sold me twice for a slave, and separated me from my father, and there is no one to pity me. Arise, lay your cause against them before Yahuwah, and see whom Yahuwah will justify in the judgment, and whom he will condemn. Arise, O my mother, arise, awake from your sleep, and see my father, how his being is with me this day, and comfort him and ease his heart." And Joseph continued to speak these words, and Joseph cried aloud and wept bitterly upon his mother's grave. And he ceased speaking from the bitterness of heart, and he became still as a stone upon the grave. And Joseph heard a voice speaking to him from beneath the ground, which answered him with bitterness of heart and with the voice of weeping and praying in these words: my son Joseph, I have heard the voice of your weeping and the voice of your lamentation. I have seen your tears and know your troubles, my son. It grieves me for your sake, and abundant grief is added to my grief. Now therefore, my son Joseph, my son, hope to Yahuwah and wait for him, and do not fear, for Yahuwah is with you, and he will deliver you from all trouble. Rise, my son, go down to Egypt with your masters, and do not fear, for Yahuwah is with you, my son. And she continued to speak similar words to Joseph, and she was still. And Joseph heard this, and he wondered greatly at this, but he continued to weep. And after this, one of the Ishmaelites observed him crying and weeping on the grave, and his wrath was kindled against him. And he drove him from there, and he struck him and cursed him. And Joseph said to the men, May I find favor in your sight to take me back to my father's house, and he will give you abundant riches? And they answered him, saying, Are you not a slave? And where is your father? If you had a father, you would not already twice have been sold for a slave for so little value. And their wrath was still aroused against him, and they continued to strike him and chastise him. And Joseph wept bitterly. And Yahuwah saw Joseph's affliction, and Yahuwah again smote those men and chastised them, and Yahuwah caused darkness to envelope them upon the earth, and the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and the earth shook at the sound of the thunder and of the mighty wind. And the men were afraid and did not know where they should go. And the beasts and camels stood still, and they led them, but they would not go. They struck them, and they crouched upon the ground. And the men said to each other, What is this that Yahuwah had done to us? What are our transgressions, and what are our sins, that this matter has so befallen us? And one of them answered and said to him, Maybe because of the sin of afflicting the slave has this matter befallen us today. Now therefore implore him strongly to forgive us, and then we shall know for whose sake this evil befalls us. And if Yahuwah shall have compassion over us, then we shall know that all this came upon us because of the sin of afflicting the slave. And the men did so, and they begged Joseph and pressed him to forgive them. And they said, We have sinned to Yahuwah and to you. Now therefore promise to request of of your your God, and that he shall put away this death from among us, and he have as we for we have sinned against him. And Joseph did according to their words, and Yahuwah listened to Joseph, and Yahuwah put away the plague which he inflicted upon these men because of Joseph. And the beast rose up from the ground, and they led them, and they went on, and raging storm abated, and the earth became quiet. And the men continued on their journey to go down into Egypt. And the men knew that this evil had befallen them because of Joseph. And they said to each other, Look, we know that it was because of this affliction that this evil has befell us. Now therefore, why shall we bring this death upon our beings? Let us hold counsel on what to do with this slave. And one answered and said, Indeed, he told us to bring him back to his father. Now therefore, come, let us take him back, and we will go to the place that he will tell us, and take from his clan the price that we gave for him, and we will then go away. And one answered again and said, Look, this counsel is very good, but we cannot do so, for the way is very far from us, and we cannot go out of our way. And one more answered and said to them, This is the counsel to be taken, that we will not swerve from it. See, we are this day going to Egypt, and when we have come to Egypt, we will sell him there at a high price, and we will be delivered from his evil. And this word pleased the men, and they did so, and they continued their journey to Egypt with Joseph. Chapter 43. And when the sons of Jacob had sold their brother Joseph to the Midianites, their hearts were smitten because of him. And they repented of their acts, and they sought for him to bring him back, but could not find him. And Reuben returned to the pit in which Joseph had been put in order to lift him out and to restore him to his father. And Reuben stood by the pit, but he heard not a word. And he called out, Joseph, Joseph, but no one answered or uttered a word. And Reuben said, Joseph has died through fright, or some serpent has caused his death. And Reuben went down into the pit, and he searched for Joseph, and could not find him in the pit, and he came out again. And Reuben tore his garments, and he said, the youth is not there. And how shall I reconcile my father about him if he be dead? He went to his brothers and found them grieving because of Joseph, and consulting together how to appease their father about him. And Reuben said to his brothers, I came to the pit, and see, Joseph was not there. What then shall we say to our father? For my father will indeed seek the boy from me. And his brothers answered him, saying, thus and thus we did, and our hearts afterwards smote us because of this deed, and we now sit and seek an excuse on how we shall appease our father towards it. And Reuben said to them, what is this that you have done to bring down gray hairs of our father in sorrow to the grave? The matter is not good that you have done. And Reuben sat with them, and they all rose up and swore to each other not to tell this matter to Jacob. And they all said that the man who will tell this to our father or his household, or who will report this to any of the children of the land, we will all rise up against him and slay him with the sword. And the sons of Jacob feared each other in this manner from the youngest to the oldest, and no one spoke a word, and they concealed the matter in their hearts. And afterwards they sat down to determine and plan something to say to their father Jacob concerning all these matters. And Issachar said to them, here is advice for you, if it seems good in your eyes to do this matter. Take the coat which belongs to Joseph, and tear it, and kill a kid of the goats, and dip it in its blood, and send it to our father. And when he sees it, he will say an evil beast has devoured him. Now therefore, tear his coat, and see, his blood will be upon his coat, and by your doing we shall be free from our father's grumblings. And Issachar's advice pleased them, and they listened to them, and they did according to the word of Issachar, in which he had advised them. And they hurried and took Joseph's coat and tore it, and they killed the kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood of the kid, and then trampled it in the dust. And they sent the coat to their father Jacob by the hand of Naphtali, and they commanded him to say these words, we had gathered in the cattle, and we had come as far as the way of Shechem, and farther, and then we find this robe on the way in the wilderness, soaked in blood and dust. Now therefore know whether it be your son's robe or not. And Naphtali went, and he came to his father, and he gave him the coat, and he spoke to him all the words which his brother had commanded him. And Jacob saw Joseph's coat, and he knew it, and he fell on his face to the ground, and he became still as stone. And afterward he rose up and cried out with a loud and weeping voice, and said, it is the robe of my son Joseph. And Jacob hastened and sent one of his servants to his sons, who went to them and found them coming along the way with the flock. And the sons of Jacob came to their father about evening, and see, their garments were torn, and dust was on their heads, and they found their father crying out and weeping with a loud voice. And Jacob said to his sons, tell me truly, what evil have you suddenly brought upon me this day? And they answered their father Jacob, saying, we were coming along this day after the flock we had been gathered in, and we have come as far as the city of Shechem by the way of the wilderness. And we found this robe soaked with blood on the ground, and we knew it, and we sent to you if you could know it. And Jacob heard the words of his sons, and he cried out with a loud voice, and he said, it is the robe of my son, an evil beast has devoured him. And Joseph is torn in pieces, and for I sent him this day to see whether it is well with you and well with the flocks, and to bring me word again from you. And he went as I command him. And and this has befallen him this day while I thought my son was with you. And the sons of Jacob answered and said, He did not come to us, neither have we seen him from the time of your going out from you until now. And when Jacob heard their words, he again cried out aloud, and he rose up and tore his garments, and he put sackcloth upon his loins and wept bitterly. And he mourned and lifted up his voice and weeping and exclaimed and spoke these words. Joseph, my son, O my son Joseph, I've sent you this day after the welfare of your brothers, and see, you have been torn in pieces. Through my hand has this befallen my son. It grieves me for you, Joseph, my son, it grieves me for you. How sweet were you to me during life, and now how exceedingly bitter is your death to me. Oh, that I had died in your place, Joseph, my son, for it grieves me sadly for you, my son. Oh, my son, Joseph, my son, where are you and where have you been taken? Arise, arise from your place and come and see my grief for you, oh, my son, Joseph. Come now and number the tears gushing from my eyes from down my cheeks, and bring them up before Yahuwah, that his wrath may turn from me. O Joseph, my son, how did you fall? By the hand of one whom no one had fallen from the beginning of the world to this day. For you have been put to death by a smiting of an enemy, inflicted with cruelty. But indeed I know that this has befallen you because of the multitude of my sins. Arise now and see how bitter my trouble is for you, my son. Although I did not raise you, nor formed you, nor give you breath and being, but it was Yahuwah who formed you and built your bones and covered them with flesh and breathed in your nostrils and the breath of life, and he gave you to me. Now truly Yahuwah who gave you to me, he has taken you from me, and this had befallen you. And Jacob continued to speak such words concerning Joseph, and he wept bitterly, fell to the ground, and became still. And all the sons of Jacob, seeing their father's trouble, repented of what they had done. They also wept bitterly. And Judah rose up and lifted his father's head upon the ground and placed it upon his lap, and he wiped his father's tears from his cheeks. And Judah wept an exceedingly great weeping, while his father's head was resting on his lap, still as stone. And the sons of Jacob saw their father's trouble, and they lifted up their voices and continued to weep. And Jacob was still lying on the ground, still as stone. And all his sons and his servants' children rose up and stood around him to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And the whole household of Jacob rose up and mourned a great mourning for the sake of Joseph and their father's trouble. And the news reached Isaac, the son of Abraham, and the father of Jacob, and he wept bitterly for the sake of Joseph, he and all his household. And he went from the place where he dwelt in Hebron, and his men with him, and he comforted Jacob his son, but he refused to be comforted. And after this, Jacob rose up from the ground, and his tears were running down his cheeks. And he said to his sons, Rise up and take your swords and your bows, and go out to the field, and seek whether you can find my son's body, and bring it to me, that I may bury it. Seek also, please, among the beasts, and hunt them, that which shall come at the first before you, and seize and bring it to me. Maybe Yahuwah will pity my affliction this day, and prepare before you that which tore my son in pieces, and bring it to me, and I will avenge the cause of my son. And the sons did as their father had commanded them, and they rose early in the morning, each took his sword and his bow in his hand, and they went out into the field to hunt the beasts. And Jacob was still crying aloud and weeping and walking to and fro in the house and smiting his hands together and saying, Joseph, my son, Joseph, my son. And the sons of Jacob went into the wilderness to seize the beast, and see, a wolf came towards them, and they seized it and brought it to their father. And they said to him, This is the first we have found, and we have brought it to you as you have commanded us. but your son's body we could not find. And Jacob took the beast from the hands of his son, and he cried out with a loud and weeping voice, holding the beast in his hand. And he spoke with a bitter heart to the beast, why did you devour my son Joseph? And how did you have no fear of Yahuwah, the Almighty of the earth, or of my trouble for my son Joseph? And you have devoured my son for naught, and he committed no violence, and by this I bear the blame for his sake. Therefore Yahuwah will require him that is persecuted. And Yahuwah opened the mouth of the beast in order to comfort Jacob with its words, and it answered Jacob and spoke these words to him. As Yahuwah lives, who created us in this earth, as if your being lives, my master, I did not see your son, neither did I tear him to pieces, but I also came from a distant land to seek my son, who went from me this day, and I do not know whether he is alive or dead. And I came this day into the field to seek my son, and your sons found me, and deceived me, and increased my grief. And I have this day brought me before you, and I have now spoken all my words to you. Now therefore, O Son of Man, I am in your hands. Do to me this day as it seems good in your eyes. But the life of Yahuwah who created me, I did not see your son, nor did I tear him to pieces. Neither has the flesh of man entered my mouth all the days of my life. And when Jacob heard the words of the beast, he was greatly astonished, and released the beast from his hand, and she went her way. And Jacob was still crying aloud and weeping for Joseph day after day, and he mourned for his son many days. Chapter 44. And the sons of Ishmael, who had bought Joseph from the Midianites, who had bought him from his brothers, went to Egypt with Joseph, and they came upon the borders of Egypt. When they came near to Egypt, they met 4 men of the sons of Midian, the sons of Abraham, who had gone down from the land of from Egypt on their journey. And the Ishmaelites said to them, do you desire to purchase this slave from us? And they said, give him over to us. And they gave Joseph over to them, and they saw him, and he was a very handsome youth, and they purchased him for 20 shekels. And the Ishmaelites continued their journey into Egypt, and the Midianites also returned that day to Egypt. And the Midianites said to each other, look, we have heard that Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, seeks a good servant who shall stand before him to attend him and make him an overseer over his house and all belonging to him. Now therefore come, let us sell him to him for what we may desire, for if he is able to give to us that which he shall require for him. And the Midianites went and came to the house of Potiphar, and said to him, we have heard that you seek a good servant to attend you. Look, we have a servant that will please you. If you can give to us that which we may desire, and we shall sell him to you. And Potiphar said, bring him before me, and I will see him. If he pleases me, I will give to you that which you may require for him. And the Midianites went and brought Joseph and placed him before Potiphar, and he saw him, and he pleased him exceedingly. And Potiphar said to them, truly, what you require for this youth? And they said, 400 pieces of silver we desire for him. And Potiphar said, I will give it to you if you bring me the record of his sale to you, and will tell me his history, for maybe he is stolen. For this youth is neither a slave nor the son of a slave, but I observe in him the appearance of a pleasant and handsome person. And the Midianites went and brought him to the Ishmaelites who had sold him to them, and they told him, saying, he is a slave, and we sold him to them. And Potiphar heard the words of the Ishmaelites, and in his given the silver to the Midianites, and the Midianites took the silver and went on their journey, and the Ishmaelites also returned home. And Potiphar took Joseph and brought him to his house, and that he might serve him. And Joseph found favor in the sight of Potiphar, and he placed trust in him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that belonged to him he delivered over to his hand. And Yahuwah was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man. And Yahuwah favored the house of Potiphar for the sake of Joseph. And Potiphar left all that he had in the hand of Joseph, and Joseph caused matters to come in and go out, and everything was regulated by his word in the house of Potiphar. And Joseph was 18 years old, a youth with good looking eyes and of handsome appearance, and none like him in the whole land of Egypt. And at that time, while he was in his master's house, going in and out of the house, attended his master, his master Selikah, his master's wife, lifted up her eyes towards Joseph, and she looked at him, and see, he was a youth, handsome in form and appearance. And she coveted his good looks in her heart, and her being was fixated upon Joseph, and she enticed him day after day. And Selikah pressed Joseph daily, but Joseph did not lift up his eyes to look upon his master's wife. And Silikog said to him, "How handsome is your appearance in form! Indeed, I have looked at all the slaves, and I have not seen such a good-looking slave as you are." And Joseph said to her, "Certainly, he who has created me in my mother's womb created all mankind." And she said to him, "How good looking are your eyes, in which you have dazzled all the inhabitants of Egypt, men and women." And he said to her, "How good looking they are while we are alive, but should you see them in the grave, indeed you would move away from them." And she said to him, "How fair and pleasing are all your words. Please take the harp which is in your house and play with your hands, and let us hear your words." And he said to her, "How fair and pleasing are my words when I speak the praise of 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 my father and his esteem." And she said to him, "How very good looking is the hair of your head. See the golden comb which is in the house. Please take it and curl the hair of your head." And he said to her, "How long will you speak these words? Cease speaking these words to me, and rise and attend to your household matters." And she said to him, "There is no one in my house. There is nothing to attend to but to your words and to your desire." Yet, despite all this, she could not bring Joseph to her, neither did he place his eye upon her, but directed his eyes below to the ground. And Selikah desired Joseph in her heart that he should lie with her. And at the time that Joseph was sitting at the house doing his work, Selikah came and sat before him, and she enticed him daily with her words to lie with her, or ever to look at her. But Joseph would not listen to her. And she said to him, "If you will not do according to my words, I will punish you with the punishment of death, and put an iron yoke upon you." And Joseph said to her, "Indeed, Yahuwah who created man loosens the shackles of prisoners, and it is he who will deliver me from your prison and from your judgment." And when she could not overcome him to persuade him, her being was still fixated upon him, her desire threw her into a grievous sickness. And all the women of Egypt would came to visit her, and they said to her, "Why are you in this declining state, you that lack nothing? Indeed, your husband is a great and esteemed prince in the sight of the sovereign. Should you lack anything from what your heart desires?" And Selikah answered them, saying, "This day shall it be made known to you where this unrest arises in which you see me." And she commanded her female servants to prepare food for all the women, and she made a banquet for them, and all the women ate in the house of Selikah. And she gave them knives to peel the oranges to eat them, and she commanded that they should dress Joseph in costly garments, and that he should appear before them. And Joseph came before their eyes, and all the women looked on Joseph and could not take their eyes from him, and they cut all their hands with the knives that they had in their hands, and all the oranges that were in their hands were filled with blood. And they did not know that they had what they had done, but they continued to look at the good looks of Joseph and did not turn their eyelids from him. And Silica saw that they had what they had done, and she said to them, "What is this matter that you have done? Look, I gave you oranges to eat, and you have all cut your hands." And all the women looked at their hands, and see, they were full of blood, and their blood flowed down on their garments. And they said to her, "This slave in your house has overcome us. We could not turn our eyelids from him because of his good looks." And she said to them, "Indeed, this came to be the moment that you looked at him, you could not contain yourself from him. How then can I refrain when he is constantly in my house and I see him day after day going in and out of my house? How then can I keep from declining or even perishing because of this?" And they said to her, "The words are true, for who can see this good looking form in the house and refrain from him? But he is not your slave and attendant in your house. Why do you not tell him that which is in your heart, but to allow your being to perish through this matter?" And she said to them, "I am daily endeavoring to persuade him, but he will not consent to my wishes. And I promised him everything that is good, and yet I could meet with no return from him. I am therefore in a declining state, as you see." And Silica became very ill because of her desire towards Joseph, and she was desperately lovesick because of him. And all the people of the house of Silica and her husband knew nothing of the matter, and Silica was ill because of her love towards Joseph. And all the people of her house asked her, saying, "Why are you ill and declining, yet lack not?" And she said to him, "I do not know this matter which is daily increasing upon me." And all the women and her friends came daily to see her, and they spoke with her. And she said to him, "This can only be through the love of Joseph." And they said to her, "Entice him and seize him secretly. Maybe he may listen to you and put off this death from you." And Silica became worse from her love towards Joseph, and she continued to decline until she scarcely had strength to stand. And on a certain day, Joseph was doing his master's work in the house, and Silica came secretly and fell suddenly upon him. And Joseph rose up against her, and he was more powerful than she, and he brought her down to the ground. And Silica wept because of the desire of her heart towards him, and she begged him with weeping, and her tears flowed down from her cheeks, and she spoke to him in a voice of pleading and in bitterness of being, saying, "Have you ever heard, as seen, or known of so good looking a woman as I am, or better than myself, who speaks daily to you and falls into a decline through love for you, and lay all this honor upon you, and still you would not listen to my voice? And if it is through fear of your master, lest he punishes you, as the sovereign lives, no harm shall come to you from your master through this matter. Now therefore please listen to me and consent for the sake of the honor which I've laid upon you, and put off this death from me. And why should I die for your sake?" And she ceased to speak. And Joseph answered her, saying, "Refrain from me, and leave this matter to my master. Look, my master does not know what there is with me in the house, for all belongs to him. He is delivered in my hand. And how shall I do these matters in my master's house? For he has also greatly honored me in this house, and he has also made me an overseer over this house, and he has exalted me, and there is no one greater in this house than I am. And my master has kept nothing from you except you who are his wife. How then can you speak these words to me? And how can I do this great evil and sin against Yahuwah and against your husband?" Now therefore refrain from me, and speak such words as these no more, for I will not listen to your words. But Selica would not listen to Joseph, and she spoke when he spoke those words to her, and she daily enticed him to listen to her. And it came to be after this that the river of Egypt was filled above all its sides, and all the inhabitants of Egypt went out, and the sovereign and the princes, and also went out with timbrels and dances, for it was a great rejoicing in Egypt, and a holiday at the time of the flooding of the sea Sihor. And they came there to rejoice all the day. And when the Egyptians went out to the river to rejoice, as was their custom, all the people of the house of Potiphar went with them, but Silica would not go with them, for she said, I am sick. And she remained alone in the house, and no other person was with her in the house. And she rose up and went up to her palace in the house, and dressed herself in princely garments, and she placed precious shoham stones upon her head, and inlaid with silver and gold, and she adorned her face and skin with all kinds of women's purifying liquids. And she perfumed the palace and the house with cassia, frankincense, and she spread myrrh and aloes. And afterwards she sat at the entrance of the palace, and in the passage of the house through which Joseph passed to do his work. And see, Joseph came from the field and entered the house to do his master's work. And he came to the place through which he had passed, but he saw all Selica has done, and he turned back. And Selica saw Joseph turning back from her, and she called out to him, saying, What troubles you, Joseph? Come to your work, and see, I will make room for you until you shall have passed to your seat. And Joseph returned and came to the house, and passed from there to place of his seat, and he sat down to do his master's work as usual. And see, Selica came to him and stood before him in regal garments, and the scent from her clothes was spread to a distance. And she hastened and caught hold of Joseph and his garments, and she said to him, As the sovereign lives, if you will not perform my request, you shall die today. And she hastened and stretched out her other hand and drew a sword from beneath her garments, and she placed it on Joseph's neck. And she said, Rise and perform my request, if not, you die today. And Joseph was afraid of her at her doing this matter, and he rose up to flee from her, but she seized the front of his garments in the fear of his flight. The garment which Selica seized was torn, and Joseph let the garment in the hand of Selica, and he fled and got out, for he was fearful. And when Selica saw that Joseph's garment was torn, and he had left it in her hand and had fled, she was afraid of her life, lest the report should spread concerning her. And she rose up and acted with cunning, and took off the garments in which she was dressed, and she put on her other garments. And she took Joseph's garment, and she laid it beside her, and she went and seated herself in the place where she sat in her illness. Before the people of her house, she had gone out to the river. And she called a young man who was then in the house, and she ordered him to call the people of the house to her. And when she saw them, she said to them in a loud voice and lamentation, See what sort of Hebrew your master has brought to me in the house, for he came to me this day to lie with me. For when you had gone out, he came to the house, seeing that there was no person in the house, and he came towards me and caught a hold of me with the intent to lie with me. And I seized his garments and tore them, and called out against him with a loud voice. And when I lifted up my voice, he was afraid for his life, and left his garment before me and fled. And all the people of her house spoke nothing, but the wrath was very much kindled against Joseph. And they went to his master and told him the words of his wife. And Potiphar came home enraged, and his wife cried out, saying, What is this matter that you have done to me in bringing a Hebrew servant into my house? For he came to me today to mock me, as he did so to me today. And Potiphar heard the words of his wife, and he ordered Joseph to be punished with severe blows. And they did so to him. And while they were striking him, Joseph called out with a loud voice, and she lifted up his eyes to the heavens, and he said, O Yahuwah, you know that I am innocent of all these matters. Why shall I die this day through falsehood by the hand of these uncircumcised wicked men whom you know? And while Potiphar's men were beating Joseph, he continued to cry out and weep. And there was a child there, 11 months old. And Yahuwah opened the mouth of the child, and he spoke these words before Potiphar's men, who were striking Joseph, saying, What do you want of this man, and why do you do this evil to him? My mother speaks falsely and speaks lies. Such was the matter. And the child told them rightly all that came to pass, and he told to them all the words of Selecah to Joseph day after day. And all the men heard of the words of the child, and they wondered greatly at the child's words. And the child ceased to speak and became still. And Potiphar was very much ashamed at the words of his son, and he commanded his men not to beat Joseph any more, and the men ceased beating Joseph. And Potiphar took Joseph and ordered him to be brought to justice before the priests, who were judges belonging to the sovereign, in order to judge him concerning the matter. And Potiphar and Joseph came before the priests who were who were in who were the sovereign's judges, and he said to them, Please decide what judgment is due to a servant for what he has done. And the priest said to Joseph, Why did you do this matter to your master? And Joseph answered them, saying, Not so, my masters, this was the matter. And Potiphar said to Joseph, Indeed, I entrusted all belonging to me into your hands, and I withheld nothing from you but my wife, and how could you do this evil? And Joseph answered, saying, Not so, my masters, Yahuwah lives as your being lives, my master. The word which you heard from your wife is untrue, for this was the matter this day. And a year has passed by me since I have been in your house. Have you seen any wickedness in me, or any matter which might cause you to demand my life? And the priest said to Potiphar, Please send him, let him bring before us Joseph's torn garment, and let us see the tear in it, and if it shall be that the tear is in front of the garment, then his face must have been the opposite to her, that she must caught a hold of him to come to her, and your wife has done all that she has spoken with deceit. And they brought Joseph's garment before the priests who were judges, and they looked and see the tear was in front of Joseph, and all the judging priests knew that she had pressed him. And they said, The judgment of death is not due to the slave, for he has done nothing, but his judgment is that he be placed in the prison house because of the report which through him has gone out against your wife. And the Potiphar listened to their words, and he placed him in the prison, in the place where the sovereign's prisoners are imprisoned. And Joseph was in the prison 12 years. Nevertheless, his master's wife did not turn from him. She did not cease from speaking to him day after day to listen to her. At the end of the 3 months, Selecah continued going to Joseph to the prison day after day, as she enticed him to listen to her. And Selecah said to Joseph, How long will you remain in this house? But listen now to my voice, and I will bring you out of this house. And Joseph answered her, saying, It is better for me to remain in this house than to listen to your words to sin against Yahuwah. And she said to him, If you will not perform my desire, I will pluck out your eyes and add shackles to your feet and deliver you unto the hands of them who you did not know before. And Joseph answered her and said, See, Yahuwah of the whole earth is able to deliver me from all that you can do to me. For he opens the eyes of the blind, and he loosens that which are bound, and watches over all strangers who are unknown in the land. And when Selecah was unable to persuade Joseph to listen to her, she ceased going to entice him, but Joseph was still confined in the prison. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, and all his brothers who were in the land of Canaan still mourned and wept in those days for the sake of Joseph. And Jacob refused to be comforted, for his sons Joseph. And Jacob cried aloud and wept and mourned all those days. So that's it for chapter 44. So yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed this reading, and yeah, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Shalom, everyone.